Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's discussion on a double feature. And sadly, this is the last week you're going to see my Christmas tree, so oh well.
Mine's already gone.
You have to wait till New Year's. Oh, brother. Anyways, we hope you guys had a wonderful holiday and Merry Christmas and a hopeful Happy New Year. But that being said, this week, as you know, we're Versus Week, one of my favorite weeks of the month, if I am going to spill my guts to you. It is that. And this week, taking a look at Superman versus Man of Steel. So, Derek, here's my first question.
Okay.
As I mentioned in my review, Superman's been around a long time. In fact, this is the 75th anniversary of the Man of Steel himself.
Holds his age well.
And after, yes, he has aged well indeed. He certainly has. And obviously, as you mentioned in your review, there have been many interpretations and many different writers and many stories, and that's all fine and well. I'm fine with that. However, I have a small problem with a Superman who can fix all his problems by basically flying around the world backwards. And at the expense of his father's wisdom, that he not interfere with the, I can't remember what the exact quote is, but, don't interfere with the human element of life. That's, and so, and I understand your point of view. That came out in the 70s, and that was a very different time than now with post 9/11. But I'm wondering if then we could make the claim that the Christopher Reeve's Superman films will not age very well.
No, I think the 78 has aged better than definitely the other three Superman films that he made. It has sort of the lightheartedness of the comic feel.
Sure.
I will point out, though, when he disobeys his father's advice by traveling around the world backwards, we have to forget there was two father figures talking to him at that moment in time. So he wasn't disobeying the father per se. There was Jor-El saying, don't interfere, but then there's Papa Kent saying, you've been put on this earth for a reason. And he now had to figure out what path he was going to follow, and he went firmly with Papa Kent and said, you're right, I have been put on this earth for a reason, and his reason might have been, I'm going to save Lois Lane. That's his reason. Maybe there's others.
Oh.
And as soon as that's his reason, Jor-El takes a back seat, and he really, I think at that moment in time, cements where his loyalties are going to lie. Are his loyalties going to be in his father's grand, just observe and do all of this stuff, be a nice guy, but be detached, or be messily engaged in human affairs? And he chose the latter. So
right,
I would argue. So it humanizes him a little bit. We don't want to see the goody-goody that sticks to the letter of the law. We want to see him break a few rules for the greater good. And he does. Possibly.
Right, and I'm okay with that, but I also want a Superman who, gets down and dirty in the trenches with us. And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't like Superman because he's not relatable. Well, I think that's a garbage excuse, because we've all felt loneliness. And in fact, one could make the argument that he has felt loneliness to a point where none of us will ever experience. We will never be the sole survivor of our race, and be stranded on some random planet and be raised by mortals. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think any of us will ever experience that. So there's that element, but also there's the element of self-sacrifice. That he chooses, instead of to rule all mankind, he chooses to submit himself to mankind. Mm. Whereas if it's, I'm going to save the world, and then if I don't get the outcome I want, whoops, don't worry, I can fly around the world backwards and I can reverse everything and get everything I want in the end. Because that's not real life. Real life is we make choices and stuff happens, and sometimes we end up on top and sometimes we don't. And it's when we don't end up on top, that's when we have to pick ourselves up and be like, okay, what am I going to do from here? And that's also what I liked about Man of Steel. Man of Steel is the same way, where he had to make this really hard choice. This choice of, I don't want to, but I must. I have to. Because this is what life's all about.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right, and I think Man of Steel does a better job in showing the loneliness of Clark throughout his life.
Yes.
He becomes sort of the drifter, the vagabond, not somebody who finds a glowing rod in his farm and then heads north to create the Fortress of Solitude.
Right.
So, I mean, I liked that aspect of it, but let me ask you this. Because I think in the 78 Superman, he does feel that despair and that tragedy when Jonathan dies of the heart attack, and he says then and there... I guess
that's true, yeah.
He says then and there that, with all my powers I couldn't have saved him, and it doesn't dawn on him then and there to fly around the world backwards for some odd reason.
Right, exactly.
And maybe he wouldn't have had Jonathan do that little race and would have taken him to a doctor or something.
Right, exactly.
But let me ask you this, because he dies of a heart attack in 78, whereas in Man of Steel, it's not a heart attack, it's a tornado, and the only thing that's stopping him is Jonathan Kent saying, don't reveal your powers, don't come and rescue me.
Right.
Which one do you think is more effective in showing the limits or character of Superman?
See, again, I'm going to have to go with Man of Steel on this one. And my reason for picking Man of Steel is because I just like Jonathan Kent's reason. It's not that you're a freak. It's not that, and I love that his mom says that, what the truth about you is beautiful, but the world may not be ready for this truth. And so you have to decide when the world will be ready. Now, I will admit, Man of Steel, it's sort of forced upon him. You know what I mean? Like, he finds the little ship and he talks to his dad and he learns about his planet and he finds the suit and he tries it on. And he's like, oh, this is cool. But then he takes it off and he goes home. And he's like, oh, that was cool, but I'm going to go home now. And then Zod comes and it's like, well, I don't really have a choice. Now I have to suit up or else the whole world's going to die, So I didn't really like that aspect of that it was kind of like forced upon him. But I did like Jonathan Kent's reason that, because there's this choice. I mean, we have a choice. And I love that. I love when we talk about choice because it's such an interesting concept that we need to figure out kind of where we're going to go with our life. And that's totally up to us. No one else can tell me what to do. I am the sole commander of that, And I just like that. I like that take on Man of Steel where Jonathan says, this is your choice. It's not my choice. It's not your mother's choice. It's not even your biological father's choice. This is your choice. You need to decide when you're going to tell everyone that you're here to make a difference.
So on the one hand, yeah, there's the emphasis on choice. On the other hand, there's Jor-El and all of this stuff, saying all this stuff at the beginning of the movie that, the hopes and dreams of the Kryptonian race go with Kal-El, and he specifically picked this one planet for all of these reasons, and it seems like Jor-El has specifically almost crafted the future for his son. So I'm wondering how much of this is actually Kal-El's choice and how much of it is him just acting out the necessary destiny that Jor-El has constructed for him.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. You're right, because he's making choices based off the circumstances that Jor-El has put him in. I guess. Okay, yeah, I mean, I see that.
Just like you were saying, the choice to come out as Superman is not his. It's sort of forced upon him, and I think that all of the choices in Man of Steel are simply forced upon him. He's very much not in control of the situation at all, at any point in the film.
Right.
And
right.
He just has to make these choices to do the best he can, and I think that's one thing that really appeals to me if we're supposed to take Superman as a relatable human figure of any sort.
Admit, as a comic reader myself, I much prefer the stories where we're connected, because I have learned in all of in all of the comic books that I am reading now, and all the comic books that I have read throughout my entire life, which is quite a few, not to toot my own horn or anything, but quite a few, I just love the stories when heroes have to make difficult choices.
Well, I mean, to be fair, to the stories, I like that you're pointing out, these are the stories, but I feel that the stories you're mentioning are a lot of the more recent, the newer stories of Superman.
You're right.
Because I'm thinking about, like, the old cartoons and even the old television series back in the 50s and even 40s. Yeah. If Superman was in a tight spot, they just invented a new power for him. And so, boom.
Right.
Yeah, you got it. And so he can get out of it. And it almost got to the point of being somewhat ridiculous. He wasn't a dynamic character. He never learned anything. He always got his way. And I feel like the 78 Superman film with Reeves is harkening back to those stories there.
Right. All right, everybody. Well, that brings our discussion to a close, but we would love to know what you think. Let us know in the comments section below which Superman film you prefer. As always, you can also find all our social media links down below. Feel free to follow us so you can see all the things we're doing throughout the week. And we'll see you guys in a couple of days when we announce the foreign film we're going to be taking a look at next week. Until then, watch good movies.